Richard Norton is a martial arts expert and movie star from Australia. After moving to California, he began training every day with the legendary Chuck Norris, who became his best friend. He was also Mick Jagger and Stevie Nicks' personal trainer, and later on became a movie star, working with Jackie Chan and Sammo in incredible, memorable fights, just to name a few. Still working hard every day, but doesn't mind stopping to talk about his life and give us some great advice on training and mindset. You're gonna enjoy each second of this great conversation. This is Richard Norton for the Bruce Willow podcast. I actually think the first movie I saw of you, I don't recall if it was China O'Brien or if it was Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars. So I don't remember whether you were kicking ass or getting your butt kicked.
I know. Look, obviously two very, very different movies.
Yeah.
Twinkle Twinkle, that was my very first movie in Hong Kong, working with Jackie Chan and Sammo and Yin Bill, and I think we shot that in 1984. So I would think China O'Brien came after. In fact, it did definitely come after Twinkle Twinkle, because you know why? It was when I was in Hong Kong shooting Twinkle Twinkle that I first heard about an American blue-eyed girl doing martial art movies in Hong Kong, and that was, of course, Cynthia Rothrock.
Yeah.
And she was shooting a film called Yes, Madam. So I heard stories about this girl, and I hadn't met her. And it's only later we worked in a film called Millionaires Express, with Sammo Hung.
Shanghai Express,
Shanghai Express, and that's when Cynthia and I... Yeah, well, that's when we first got to work together, and it's after that, going back to the States, that I ended up doing China O'Brien and Raging on a 1 and 2 with Cynthia, as well as Lady Dragon and quite a few other movies. Magic Crystal was another one we shot together in Hong Kong.
Yep. And I remember one movie. I think it's an Australian movie called Kick Fighter.
No, well, Kick Fighter was shot in the Philippines.
Oh, Philippines.
No, there was the Australian movie you're probably talking about was called Under the Gun. And in a lot of European countries, it was released as Iron Fist. And that's a movie that I did the lead in. Kathy Long was an American kickboxing champion who was in it. Maybe that one. We shot that in Melbourne, Australia.
Then it's my bad, because I'm talking about the one. I think it's Kick Fight. I'm talking about the one with Benny the Jet being the last guy that you fight in the ring. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was Kick Fighter, and that was shot in the Philippines.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. But did you have some other Australian people on the crew, or am I all mixing it all up?
No, not in Kick Fighter. Kick Fighter was all American. It was I think Tony
Manila.
Maharaj.
It was the Killer in Manila, right? Somebody said Killer in Manila.
That's it. How's it be called? The Killer in Manila.
And you grab the guy. See, it's amazing what we remember as kids. I remember you grabbing a guy and saying, "Penai did this, right? Right?
Penai did this, right? Let go of me or I'll call a guard."
You remember that line?
Yeah.
It's amazing what we remember. I mean, why did it get stuck in my head?
I don't know. Kick Fighter was a lot of fun for me, Bruno, just because, of course, getting to work with someone like Benny the Jet. Benny Urquidez, again, for those out there who don't know, Benny's a kickboxing legend. He had an undefeated kickboxing record, and to get Benny involved, just because I was training at the Jet Center, which was Benny's main studio or academy in Los Angeles, and to get him on it was fantastic. And it was a good memory, but it was very funny because, what was a little difficult is the fight. I was supposed to be a character that didn't know kickboxing, right?
Mm-hmm. You
But
were
I
a
remember
brawler.
getting in the ring with Benny, and anyone who knows Benny the Jet knows that he's got an incredibly intense gaze. You know that Benny can be all nice, but once he gets in the ring, he mentally he gets in fight mode, right? So I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be in the ring, and I'm supposed to be somebody who doesn't know how to shape up. And I remember the first time we started to shoot, Benny kind of puts his hands up and he puts his head down and he puts that killer look on me, and I immediately went, "Oh shit," you know.
My
And they're
goodness.
saying, "No, you can't shape up like that. You're supposed to not know how to do that." But I still remember the feeling of what so many opponents would have faced with Benny is being in a ring and watching him look at them with that aggressive intent that he gets as a fighter. And I thought, oh, okay, now I know what it feels like to be prey.
Here we go. Here we go. So, did he or had he already done Wheels on Meals and Dragons Forever, or I don't remember the timeline specifically. Do you
No,
remember?
I don't remember either.
Oh, okay.
You know, a funny story about Meals on Wheels is that I got offered Meals on Wheels, but it was before, you know, I got offered that, I think, before Twinkle Twinkle. You know, I remember I was in Japan in a little city outside of Osaka, and I was on tour with a rock and roll superstar in those days named Linda Ronstadt.
Oh yeah.
Linda used to, you know, she was as big as Beyonce in her day. She won 12 Grammys, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm on tour with Linda, and I was in a hotel room in Japan, and I get this phone call, and this voice says, "Richard, hi, I work for Jackie Chan. You know, I'm his assistant. Jackie wants you to come and work with him in Hong Kong. What's your price?" And I went, "Wait a minute, what? You know, well, when does he want me to be there?" And she said, "Well, you need to be there in 3 days. What's your price?" It was always, "What's your price?" And I remember saying, "Well, it doesn't really matter. I can't do it. I'm on tour. I'm doing personal bodyguard work, and I'm going to be tied up for the next 2 months." So I couldn't take the movie, and I believe that's the movie that Keith Vitale, in fact, it might have been the role that Keith Vitale
Oh
played,
yeah. Hmm.
and the one Benny did, which is Meals on Wheels. And it's only later that I got a call and they offered, you know, they wanted me to do Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, but that's the tie-up with that one.
So you might have gotten that feeling. Oh, damn it! How did you?
No,
Had
well,
you?
it didn't matter, Bruno, because I hadn't been to Hong Kong yet. I
Hmm.
didn't know. Like, it's like people say, well, did you realize the impact later on in your life of working with someone like Sammo or Jackie Chan or Yuen Bill? And of course you don't at the time. All it is another job at the time. It's only 10, 20 years later when people talk about it and you realize how incredibly historical and fortunate it was in the sense of martial art movies that you got to go to Hong Kong and do multiple movies with such amazing action stars. So at the time it didn't mean anything. It's only afterwards that you realize what an impact that can have on your career.
Wow, wow. And you got quite a story. I mean, you started with judo. You were probably like 10 or 11 years old, right?
Yeah, correct. I was 11 years old, and it was just a kid that I went to high school with he moved into a house opposite to where I lived, and he was disappearing a couple of nights a week. And I happened to say, you know, "Morris, where are you going?" And he said, "Oh, I'm doing judo classes." And I was like, "Oh man, I want to go, you know, I want to do that." So I went with him. His dad used to drive the both of us to this school that was run by a policeman that worked in a place called Nunawading. It was a suburb of Melbourne. So I did judo as an 11-year-old, but you know, my memories of judo was I was so skinny and small at 11 that I got kind of pitched from one end of the dojo to the other by the older teenage kids. So I was like, wow, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, because I told people my only idea of martial arts then was the ads on the back of comic books. And most of the ads there were about judo because karate wasn't really even established in Australia. And so I saw these ads, defeat 5 people with the flick of a finger and all that. Well, suddenly I get in the judo school and I'm the one getting pitched from one end to the other. And I thought, well, this isn't quite what I imagined.
This is not what I signed up
Which
for.
led on. Yeah, no, it wasn't what I signed up for. Although they were having fun, it wasn't fun for me. But I do remember being absolutely intrigued with the whole kind of mystical nature or lure of Japanese martial arts. For me, Japanese martial arts, not so much Chinese. And it was just something that intrigued me. And it was a few years later that another friend that we did judo with told us about a karate school that's opening up 3 miles from where I lived. And there was a demonstration that Tino Severano, who was turned out to be my instructor, and in fact is responsible for setting me on this martial arts journey. He was a Hawaiian Filipino, and he was opening school. And he did a little demonstration, very basic demonstration. But I looked at that and I still remember thinking, oh my God, this is what I need to do with my life. And so I started karate, and that was the start of a whole journey.
And I'm pretty sure that the versatility that you've gotten to have with the martial arts, I mean, a lot of people talk about mixed martial arts being something fairly recent, but a lot of you guys were doing mixed martial arts in a way because you were so open to training with other people. I mean, it was when you met Chuck Norris and later on trained with him, and you were always kind of picking up stuff from other people. Nowadays, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu with the Machado brothers. So, I mean, how did you develop that versatile mindset of like Bruce Lee said, getting what was the quote? To add what is essentially your own, but to gather what's useful, discard what's useless, and to add what's specifically your own. But you can see a blend of styles in your style, even in the movies. So how did you develop that mindset of, okay, it's karate is not an end all be all martial art. If you
Yeah, no, I get your question, Bruno, and I've got to say that when I started, I wouldn't have done that knowingly, meaning that when I started judo, that's all we kind of had. Suddenly I get into karate, which was there were a couple of karate schools, but I didn't know about them. But Tino was really the one to introduce Goju Kai. It was called Goju Ryu, a Japanese version of Okinawan Goju, into Australia. But back then, I got to say that really it was a little different to now, in that if you did karate, that's usually all you did. You wouldn't do wrestling, you wouldn't do boxing. It was really that was your school and your passion. I had a friend, Bob Jones, who was 10 years older than I. Bob was renowned as a bodyguard security man. He ran security in a lot of the nightclubs in Melbourne in those days. And I'm talking about in the 60s. That's how old I am, in the 60s. So, Bob and I were training together under Hanshi Tino in Goju. And Bob wanted me to go with him to help start up a new eclectic style, meaning his own style, we called Zendo Kai, and that was in 1970. Now, in 1970, when we started, most of the students we had were doormen, were bouncers at clubs and pubs and bars. So we had a rough and tough group of people. Now, if you just teach those people traditional karate, it just didn't suit. It needed to have a reality base to it. It needed to be kind of proven to work if you were fighting some drunk or a few drunks or half a dozen drunks in some club or bar in streets of Melbourne back in the 70s. So we needed to incorporate and bring in other aspects of fighting arts, which is why we would introduce boxing, or in those days wrestling, more like a Greco-Roman form of wrestling, because we knew we had to have a mix that made the style of martial arts we were teaching suitable for the street. In other words, for the reality, not just the esoterics and not just for the meditative aspects of a lot of karate styles. So Zendo Kai was very much the start for us of mixing martial arts. And in fact, I had a magazine ask me not that long ago, well, how is Zendokai now that mixed martial arts is now the environment? I said, well, it's business as usual, because we started doing that as early as 1970. We were mixing martial arts to find the most effective fighting style in a reality-based sense. So that's why getting on to when I went to the States, I started doing bodyguard work in 1973, started with the Rolling Stones, ended up working with Joe Cocker, ABBA, Swedish pop group, Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks, James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt.
All my
And it
heroes.
was in 19... And so in 1979, Linda wanted me to go to California and work full time for her, which is how I ended up in California. And this is just to give you a bit of background, and I know you'll bring this up, but in 1978, Bob and I brought Chuck Norris out to Australia to do some demonstrations at some tournaments we were running around Australia. In fact, Bob was the first one to introduce kickboxing into Australia. So Chuck came out, I was doing demonstrations, Chuck was doing demonstrations, and we got on so well. And Chuck was the one that said, look, if you ever get to California, give me a call and we'll do some training, which was like, wow, how cool is that? But it was Linda that brought me out to California that, the first person I called was Chuck Norris. And we started training at his house, which is how my movie career started, because he was in pre-production for a film called The Octagon.
The Octagon,
and
yes.
he knew I could handle all the Japanese weapons, so he wanted me to play his nemesis in Octagon. So off I went with the movie career.
That's incredible.
Of course, it's... Yeah, and you'll probably get to ask me, I might be sort of preempting a lot of this interview, but it was Chuck that went to Brazil to, it was just a holiday. He went with Bob Wall. Bob Wall, as those may know, played O'Hara in Enter the Dragon. I noticed your poster on the back of your office right there. So Bob and Chuck and the family went to Brazil. And of course, like a lot of martial artists in those days, especially Chuck, he was very, very inquisitive about martial arts wherever he went. So he asked, well, what do you do here? Where should I go? And he was advised to go and visit a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school, which happened to be the Gracie School. And he met Helio Gracie, Rickson Gracie, and I think even Royce was there. And he even had a little role on the mats with Helio Gracie. And so that was an incredible experience. And he came back to America with a videotape of some of Rickson Gracie's early Vale Tudo matches. And he showed it to me and he said, wow, look at this stuff. And that was my first introduction to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, was these videos. Chuck ended up bringing a whole bunch out of Brazilians, which was Rickson Gracie, Julian Gracie, of course, Rickson's brother. I'm not sure whether Royce was there then, but I know Pedro Sawyer came out. Carlos Machado came out. There was a whole bunch that he brought to his United Fighting Arts convention in Las Vegas and to do a seminar. And so in a way, Chuck is responsible for introducing, to a certain degree, or popularizing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in America. Even though Horion was already in America, it wasn't in the mainstream. It took somebody like a Chuck Norris and his notoriety through movies and being a karate champion in America to really open the doors for a lot of jiu-jitsu. It especially did that for the Machados and their jiu-jitsu. And that's how I started, because I heard about this through Chuck. I ended up looking around and I found Horion was in Los Angeles, and I rang him up and basically introduced myself and said, I would love to learn about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Can I get some private lessons? So off I go, and Horion was living in Redondo Beach. Rickson was there, and they were basically teaching out of a garage. And my first match when I went to the house was Rickson was there and Royce Gracie. And this is a true story. This was in the late 80s. And my very first lesson was, and first thing that Rickson said to me was, oh, my friend, because he knew I was a stand-up fighter, karate guy, whatever. And I'd been training with Benny the Jet at the Jetson, and he said, "Oh, my friend, you want to put the gloves on?" And luckily I was smart enough to say, "No, no, 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 no. It's. I just want to learn what you guys do, and see what it's all about." And my first lesson, I had to sit on hoist Gracie in the mount position and try and stay there. And the flip side was hoist sat on top of me, and I had to try and get him off. And that was the way they introduced me to the idea of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I remember walking away from that first lesson in the late 80s, and I was smart enough to go, oh my God, I felt like a little baby on the ground with these guys. I need to add this to what I do. And I say smart enough. I didn't say, oh, I'll make it instead of. I just thought, if I can add this to my stand-up abilities, how much better a martial artist am I going to be? Hence the start of my journey in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, the first time you ever try to grapple, and there's a huge difference between wrestling and jiu-jitsu, like obviously you know better than me, but the idea of being on the bottom, actually being better for someone who's grappling, it's so counterintuitive the first time you do it. So to be pulling guard, I mean, it's just something it's quite crazy for someone who's always been a striker. And I can say that for myself as well, because I just recently tried it, and I was like, I'm a ragdoll. These guys do whatever they want with me. And so if they close the gap between me and them, if I can't put them away with my striking, I'm doomed. What the hell am I gonna do? So it's really a very counterintuitive process in the beginning, and that's what I was trying to get at. I mean, if you guys did not have, and I mean you and Chuck Norris specifically, did not have that open-mindedness, you would never be as great as you became later on. And I think, just like you said, I mean, karate was karate, judo was judo. Each person was on their line, and what Bruce Lee fought his entire life against the idea of style, of fixed styles. At first, it began for you like sort of necessity, because you became a bodyguard. So all the theory and traditional forms and the katas and stuff might not work that well. I mean, they're great for conditioning. I would never disregard stuff like the katas and the forms. I come from a kung fu, a wushu background. So a lot of what I learned has served me very well in the stunt world. So that's why I can do the splits and do the flips and do the kicks and kick from whatever, being three-dimensional with the body. But then obviously if I step on a ring or if I have a street fight, it all is going to be very much different. But I wanted to ask you, because this is also a fitness channel, I wanted to ask you, you said before that you were a skinny little kid trying out judo. But you're not known for being skinny. I mean, you look incredible. You look better than me, and I'm 35. So where or when did you find out bodybuilding or trying to lift some weights? Was it when you became a bouncer, or did you already start lifting weights before you had become a bouncer?
No, you know what? My first introduction to weight training was from my father, and my dad died when I was 13. He was, Dad's been dead a long time. He died in 1962, but I do remember him. My mum told me he knocked himself around a little bit when he was younger, drank a bit, all that sort of business. But he got into weight training, and he had just a one single barbell. And I remember him showing me curls and stuff like that. And this is, again, when I was 9 and 10 years old. And he also used to take me to the wrestling. We had World Championship Wrestling, and people wouldn't remember a lot of the people I remember, like Killer Kowalski, and, there was some amazing wrestlers. And I remember being intrigued just with the idea of being more muscular and bigger, just because I was so skinny. Mm-hmm. And so he introduced me. In fact, I remember him bringing this guy called Georgie Wade, who was apparently the first Victorian bodybuilding champion. Now, again, this is a long time back. I'm talking about like 1960, for goodness sakes. Mm-hmm. So I was already aware of the idea of weight training. And back then, even in the 60s, I used to get Weeder magazines, which was...
Oh, yeah.
and being introduced to people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and even before that, and Steve Reeves, who has played Hercules, and I would see pictures of these guys and just go, "Oh wow, this is amazing." So my introduction to lifting weights was really through Weighter magazines, and weight training, how to put on weight. Back those days, their advice was you just drink lots of milk and things like that. We didn't have the sophistication of all the supplements and everything they do today. But I literally started weight training when I was 10 or 11. And when this friend who actually introduced me to judo, we had similar sort of interests, thankfully. And he set up a little gym in his house then, a little squat rack and some barbells and everything. And of course, again, they were quite crude back then. So we started lifting. And so I weight training still to this very day. I'm 70 years of age now, and still one of the most important fitness things that I do is progressive resistance training, meaning weightlifting, because it's held me in good stead ever since I was 11 years old all the way through. And I gradually put on a little bit of muscle when I just naturally had a very high metabolism. But I realized the advantage and the benefits of weight training as a bit of a supplement to my martial arts training. Like, I never wanted to be a bodybuilder or anything, but I realized the strength I could get in my shoulders and my delts for punching power, triceps, having a strong core, having strong legs for kicking. I realized how advantageous that was, and I did not ever buy into this adage that weight training, for instance, slows you down. Because I read about an Olympic weightlifter, Vasilev, back in the day. He was a powerful Russian weightlifter, and I read about him being as fast as an Olympic sprinter over, say, I'm talking meters, like a 10-meter sprint, not equal
explosive,
100 meters or whatever. But as far as explosive speed, and that was due to his powerlifting and going from negative to positive, even as far as lifting weights and everything, and how much fast twitch fiber that would develop and explosiveness. And I thought, well, that's perfect for martial arts. I mean, everything we do it's kind of like going from a positive to a negative as fast as you can. And having extra strength and power, I thought, how could that not make me stronger and better and faster as a martial artist? And that's proved true. In fact, speed's always been my attribute with karate and punching in general. So I, of all people, would not be lifting if I thought that interfered with my speed. But the opposite is true. It actually helps. It's anaerobic in nature when you lift properly. When I do weight training, I'll do a reasonably slow, negative, concentric contraction, but quite explosive on the positive aspect, which is the same way as drawing a punch back or a kick back. So weight training is absolutely, it's still, as I said, if I don't lift, I just don't feel like the same person. And if I had to pick one fitness routine, even including martial arts, if I could only do one thing to remain healthy, I'm not talking about fighting ability, it would be progressive resistance training, as in lifting weights.
That's incredible, because you were finding out in the 60s about cross training, which people do nowadays, and it took so long for people to believe. And I know that still, even when I was younger in the 90s or something, or early 2000s, I saw a lot of martial artists. The most that they would do with external weights would be grab those little dumbbells and do some sort of shadow boxing with it, or grabbing bricks and running with bricks. And I was like, okay, that's old school. That's cool. That's mentally tough to do. And I like that toughness. I like that old school type of Jackie Chan drunken master workout and stuff. But I mean, you're not going to go as far as you could go if you actually had a weightlifting routine. So I'm curious, what's a typical day for you nowadays in terms of either nutrition? And my audience always loves to know, what's your typical day? What do you eat? Do you have any sort of nutrition requirements? Do you have any sort of nutritional habits? Yeah.
Just when you said that, Bruno, my lovely wife poked her head around a corner with a big bloody grin on her face because she knows she just gave me a bit of sponge cake tonight, and I'm going to start telling you all I do is eat healthy things. Go away. This is my interview. Stay
Give me a
out of
bite. Come
this.
on. I'm hungry. Give me a bite.
No,
It's lunchtime here.
No, well, here's the deal. I've been fanatical, God, again, since in my early teens with diet. And you talk about early, and by the way, I want to just quickly say, that thank God I was very, very interested from an early age with research. Now, again, keep in mind, research in those days meant whatever magazine you could get, because I'm so old, we didn't even have videos in those days, let alone DVDs and being able to Google everything and download information. But I was very, very interested in research, and I was well aware that a lot of the old Okinawan masters, they used to have, these iron sort of rods with bowls and then concrete. So,
And the jars.
I mean, I was smart enough to realize, well, that's weight training, for God's sakes. And the reason they did that is because they didn't have the sophisticated equipment that we had even then in comparison, let alone today. So they were already doing resistance training, so that was that. But as far as my diet, I'm still doing today. No, I'd be lying. I'm a little more relaxed, but I've still had such a strict diet and training routine since a teenager. I started fasting. I remember getting a book by Paul Bragg on the miracles of fasting. So I started doing food rotating and fasting when I was a teenager. For years, I would only eat 6 days a week. I would fast 1 day every week. And when I say fast, that was purely distilled water, a little bit of cider vinegar, and a little touch of honey as a toxic dissolver, they called it. So that was all I'd have. And then for years, through my 20s and 30s, I would do a 3-day water fast, maybe 3 to 4 times a year. And twice a year, I would do a 10-day water fast where I would only have distilled water and, again, a tiny drop of cider vinegar and honey, and I would just have water for 10 days. And I still fast to this day. My wife and I do intermittent fasting where we're pretty much following the 16-8 routine where you eat over an 8-hour period and you abstain from any food. I don't have any food for the 16-hour period. And I find that's a fantastic thing for health and benefit.
So how do you divide that 16/8? Is it do you only start eating, for example, after lunch? Is it in the morning that you fast, or do you stop eating like at 5 p.m. or something?
It varies for me. Ideally for me, when I'm on a normal, I still teach classes at night here when I'm back in Australia and not working. And for me, the ideal is to have breakfast and have lunch and then stop eating by, say, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
That's ideal for me. But often with Judy, if we do it together, she likes to miss out on breakfast and then have lunch and, say, have dinner later on. It just varies. It doesn't really matter, as long as you... And again, even then, you can be 7 hours or you can be 9 hours. It's not that important as long as you have a sustained fasting period. But again, ideally for me, I feel better energy-wise. Again, I read the 4-Hour Body, and I know he was adamant that eating within half an hour of waking up and getting a certain gram amount of protein in your system was vital to set up your blood for the rest of the day. And I tend to sort of believe in that. So breakfast for me, and then having lunch, and then basically that's it, is what works best.
Do you take
But
any...
I would say to people, whatever, I'm sorry, supplements, absolutely. I'm a total believer. I've taken multivitamins and vitamins and supplements, not in the way of protein or anything, but adding certain vitamins, whether it's zinc or vitamin D or whatever, to my system. I'm very much a believer. I take DHEA because I was told after 40 your levels of DHEA, which is a precursor to testosterone, lower. So I just take a small supplement of that. I'd still take a swig of cider vinegar every day because it helps, even though it seems like it would be acidic, it's very good for creating an alkaline sort of blood type, for your body. And I think that's a very healthy thing as well. But and my idea of supplements, a lot of people say, well, supplements, they usually just leach out of your body. And I say, well, that may be so, but for me, it's insurance. I just feel if my body is lacking in a certain nutrient, the supplements will make that up. Whatever my body needs, it'll take up from my supplement intake. And whatever it doesn't, it will just get rid of. And that's completely fine. And I also, it's a psychological thing as much as anything. If I've taken all my vitamins, and I'm very good at it, I'm very strict at it, once I take them, I feel, as a placebo effect, even I feel, okay, I've taken them, I've done everything I need to do, and I automatically feel much better, about myself as a result.
That's almost that bodybuilder mentality kicking in, because usually performance athletes from sports, they don't. It's like there's this difference that I've talked about here on my podcast with some experts on bodybuilding, that they say usually performance athletes, for example, soccer athletes, they do the least amount of work possible in order to get the best results. But bodybuilders,
yes,
will freak out over have they done everything possible, because it's purely science. If they step on stage and they don't look as good as possible, that means something in their biochemistry did not work, because they didn't take everything in the right amounts, or didn't train as hard as they should. Whereas performance-wise, you're not talking about aesthetics. I mean, a lot can happen in a game, in a soccer game, in an American football game, and whatnot. And as for your training regimen, how do you divide? That's basically my main question here. How do you divide between the bodybuilding and the martial arts practice, and how many times a day do you practice? How's your typical day?
Yeah, again, that would vary. If I was on a very normal routine, I would always lift weights earlier in the day. It would give me a little bit of recuperation time, because generally I would teach at nighttime. So it suits me to do the resistance training earlier, eat a little bit and get a bit of recovery time. And my weight training is very old school. It hasn't really changed since I was 14. I'll do a split routine. I'll generally do, chest, shoulders, tries on one day, back, biceps, hamstrings on the other. And I'll tend to do, quads and that sort of aspect on a third day.
So push, pull, legs. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that suits me. The martial arts training, I don't have the same look. I've realized at my age now, I don't need to be what I call an elite athlete. So I'm at the stage where it's more about enjoying downtime as much as being in the gym and always trying to be the best you can be. So I feel, I've always said masters just tend to not make mistakes as much as beginner, meaning you tend to be a little smarter with everything you do, the techniques you will throw, how you will train. I mean, it's like Jiu Jitsu. The biggest message I have with Jiu Jitsu is, I say, you guys, I teach a lot of seminars. I said, you guys are just getting into these survival matches. I've got news for you. You are not going to last. I mean, the amount of people that started jiu-jitsu when I started, I could almost count on one hand. And I must thank the Machados for that, because their whole culture in a club is to be very careful to wrestle soft, to be caring for your partner. Because if you know yourself, if you get a heel hook on somebody, by the time they tap, the damage is already done. Or an armbar that's got against a hinge joint that has a finite amount of extension, there's a limit to that. And if you're the type that wrestles and you're going to try and fight your way out of every submission, well, you're not going to last. You're going to pop a bicep or whatever. You're going to do a knee. And then what fun is that, because then you become one of these people that loves to tell, well, I used to grapple and I used to compete and I used to do that. To which I would say, well, what do you do now? How do you feel today? because day is the first day of the rest of your life. So if you've just been this idiot that's been the one that's had to tap everybody else, or you get in the kickboxing ring and you've had to smash everybody, you're going to pay a price for that down the line. And I feel it's about the journey for me. And I also would say to these people, you know, these survival matches, I said, you know, if you train, say you train 10 years and you're the type that trains so hard that you are so jacked up that you can no longer even go in the ring or go in the academy and teach jiu-jitsu, you've wasted an incredible amount of knowledge that could be passed on to the younger ones coming through. I mean, think of Manny Pacquiao. Freddie Roach, who trains Manny Pacquiao, and Oscar De Leon.
Boxing coach, yeah.
Judy could do around with Freddie Roach because Freddie suffers from Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. But my point is that Freddie doesn't feel he has to training these people that he has to get in the ring and do 10 rounds with them. He wouldn't last a second. What makes him so valuable is his ability to make the younger people he trains better and make them champions. So I think we have an obligation, the elders in the martial arts, to stay healthy, to be sensible with how far and how hard we push ourselves in order for us to be the elders and pass on some incredible knowledge about our journeys and help the younger ones on their way.
Excellent advice on how to lead by example in your a living example of what it is to have that learning ability. Because I see that a lot of people, they go against the wall and they keep going against the wall. And sometimes you try to teach them or you try to show them, but they have to learn by themselves. And obviously a good coach, master, sensei, whatever, he or she always knows that that's part of the process. Do you feel like nowadays
sorry, Brendan. I was going to say, you know, the biggest thing, and this is where I feel traditional martial arts has helped me a lot, is it's always been about control of the ego. And these survival matches and wanting to win all the time, it's always based on ego. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing better than getting into a class and being tapped out and having that person show you how they did it. But for you to have the sense to realize that if your arm is in this position, you don't have to wait for it to be hyperextended to realize you kind of fucked up a little bit, right? Just be smart about what you do. It's learning now. And I get if you're a competitive MMA fighter, for instance, or you're getting in your professional boxer, I realize you have to spar hard. That's what you do. But understand at what price. Now, if you're getting, you know, a few $100,000, $1 million or whatever to compete, I get going to those extremes. But those who just wrestle hard like a competitor every time they go to the academy, or whatever it is they do, for what? You know, I mean, there's a price you're going to pay for that ego that says you have to be the best all the time. There is so much learning to just relax a little bit. I mean, you know, I was always told in jiu-jitsu, you know, that if you're not tapping out, you're in the wrong school anyway, because there's nobody there that can teach you anything, right? And that's the guidance I just say to people: enjoy the journey. My biggest rap, and again I'm using jiu-jitsu, is when Orion Gracie told me about his dad Elio. He said, my dad was still doing drills at 94 years of age, a year before he died. And I remember thinking, and he did say, he said, but he wouldn't have got there by having survival matches. You know, I call survival matches meaning full-on matches every day of his life. And I thought, it struck me, and I thought, how great is that to be 94 and still practicing what's been your life's passion at that age, that you're not all jacked up and you can't move or whatever. And I think that's what I want for me. I'm 70. I want to be training still when I'm 90. Yes, it'll be at a far lesser level, but that's okay. You know, that's the way I want to go out, you know?
Wow. And it's such, I mean, I get goosebumps listening to this. I always have to stop a little bit and remind myself who I'm speaking with, because it's like the internet is crazy. It's crazy. I've gotten to meet some of my true heroes, and it's like I feel like I want to cry. But you know, because the internet has a lot of good things and a lot of bad things as well. And I believe that nowadays probably it's even harder to to tell people to, relax a little bit, or don't go all out, don't have those survival matches like you were saying, and because they're always being flooded either on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever, always those motivational videos. Everybody's into the motivation. I mean, motivation is bullshit without discipline. If you don't keep walking the walk and putting the pieces to the puzzle every day with consistency, I mean, what good is motivation? Motivation might be like, I don't know, you can do a lot of things for motivation. I can drink a Red Bull and be motivated, but what about the next day? So I believe that's great advice. And do you find that it's harder now because everybody's getting those memes and stories about do your best, do your hardest, don't ever give up and stuff, and sometimes that gets into their minds and it's like, okay, no, don't go all the way, go like 90%, always leave a little bit of gas in the tank, and in the long run you'll be a true inspiration.
Well, all you can do is, as they say, people, you can only pass on, and people only receive what they're ready to receive, in a way of knowledge. And all we can do is again, a friend of mine used to say as instructors, say if I'm 70 years of age and my journey is this, and at 70 I'm here and I've got this much to go. First of all, I'm still on a journey. I'll be a different person 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But our main job, again, is like lighting these little lampposts on the way here for the newer ones and saying, look, I see you're doing what I used to do, and I'm telling you it's not good, it's injurious, it's not good for your health. What this is doing, you're good, and let me give you some advice. And I just want to be one of those people. And you just try and, this idea of being the best, yes, it's very much part of society. You have to be the richest person, wealthiest person, fittest person, the strongest person, whatever it is. And that's not bad. I still absolutely say to people, have role models, and always aspire to be the best you can be. But I still would say, at what price? When you drive yourself into the ground, you would know many professional athletes that once they get through their competitive years, they get, not all, I'm generalizing, they stop, they get fat, they get lazy, and they basically, that's it for them. I want people to know as martial artists that this journey need never stop. Again, like a helio grace until the day you're ready to die. How good is that? But be realistic. Be realistic about your age, your ability to recuperate, how hard it is to recover from injuries when you get them. That's all I'm saying to them. And stay healthy. But even then, it doesn't have to be ridiculous. I've relaxed so much. I mean, even this COVID-19, Judy and I, my wife, we've been together 34 years. We love being at home. We wrestle up on the couch. We watch a bit of TV. I'll do a bit of research. I'll do some reading. In other words, it's that downtime of, they say time to smell the roses. It's not
Yeah.
always about having to run out to the gym and spend hours. Oh, I didn't do 5 hours of weight training. I didn't do 5 hours of punching and kicking. Yes, do it. But again, just put it all in perspective. There are other things to life, In other words, don't be totally defined just by what you've achieved in your fighting art, in your bodybuilding, in whatever it is. I mean, you've seen pictures of bodybuilders ending up in wheelchairs.
Oh,
yeah. What's one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time?
Ronnie Coleman and Flex Wheeler.
Ronnie Coleman. You see him and Flex Wheeler in a wheelchair, and you go, "Oh my God!" And that's amputated. An example of. Fuck, I mean, yes, he achieved greatness, but at what price?
At what price, man?
I believe he would change everything if he had the choice, knowing how he was going to end up today. It's sad. It breaks my heart because he's such an amazing athlete. But again, put it all in perspective. That's all I'm saying.
But speaking of the survival matches, now going back a little bit. What is your favorite survival match? Against Jackie Chan on City Hunter, against Sammo Hung on Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, against Kurata Yasuaki on The Millionaire's Express? What is your favorite one? If you had to pick one and nobody's listening.
No, you picked up three amazing ones. I mean,
They're incredible.
Look, the most incredible person, I still say today, the most incredible action director and performer I've ever worked with is Sammo.
Hmm.
Sammo is amazing, and you know what it looks like. Jackie once said to me, and in Chinese, of course, it's a compliment, it's not a put down. He said, Sammo looks like an elephant, but moves like a monkey. He's amazing. And he was the first one I of course, fought in Hong Kong in Twinkle Twinkle, and I was blown away with his ability, not just as choreographer, but I mean, that guy is powerful. He can punch. He's got a spinning back kick that'll floor anybody, even today, you know, when you see some of his stuff. So that was amazing. Jackie, of course, you know, what a maestro of action movies, you know. City Hunter was a little different because it was a little more of a comedic film, hence the fight was more comedic, even for him. So it was different, but it was an incredible amount of fun when you see the end result. Fighting Karate was such a gentleman. I obviously worked with him on Twinkle Twinkle and later in Shanghai Express. And, you know, fighting somebody that's such a class act and is so talented as a Karate-san, I mean, that was fantastic. So they were all great in very different ways for me, you know. But I learned so much from them. And Yun Bill, another one. I mean, they were just amazing to work with.
I heard that they actually give you a lot of leeway in terms of defining the choreography. Like, for example, they might do with their stunt team some of the moves and say stuff like, at least Benny the Jet told me this. He told me that they were like, okay, we're going to do this. What are you going to do? It's like, do they keep an open mind in terms of what you have to bring up to the game? Did they let you in any way, shape, or form let them know that you had some sort of ideas for the fight choreography as well, or because you were kind of no, okay, no, okay.
No, I had quite a different experience, you know.
Guaylo, no.
Fine, but yeah, it was pretty much then what they choreographed, especially a Sammo, you know, who's the godfather he was then, and those stunties, they pretty much wanted you to do whatever they choreographed, and they didn't care if it took 30 takes to do it, and all the rehearsals were done on camera. Because this is why I remember flying over to Hong Kong. I'm on the way to work with Jackie and Sam, and I think, I'll be able to do this, and I'll be able to do that. Of course, when I got there and eventually started the fight with Sammo, the timing was so different to what I was used to. You know, the way they would shoot, even the way they would throw a punch was very different. And it was actually very hard for me, very frustrating for me. And it was Kurata, you know, the actor you mentioned, Kurata-san, that said to me, you could see I was getting frustrated. He said, Richard, just a little bit of advice. If you want to do movies here, he said, don't say anything. They want you to do everything the way they want you to do it. It's their movie set, it's their choreography. And I took that advice and I basically just shut up and I would do whatever they wanted me to do to the best of my ability. So that was my experience. I didn't actually get to contribute a lot in the way of choreography, though Sammo did say, what sort of kicks can you do? For instance, you know, I sort of knock him through the window with that jumping, sort of spinning crescent kick. Mm-hmm. So he would ask for that, which of course any smart choreographer would do, because there's no point getting me to try and do something that's impossible based on my expertise. You know, you would absolutely incorporate some of the abilities of the actual person and try and discover what they are. But to a lot of extent, no, it was really their way of shooting, which by the way, for that style of stuff, there is nobody better. So I would have been stupid to argue with that anyway. And I must say that one of the reasons I got so much work in Hong Kong, you know, at one stage I was the only Guaylo, the only Westerner to ever do more than one movie with Jackie. Mm-hmm. And I walked with Wong Jing in Magic Crystal. That's, you know, working with Cynthia Rothrock and Andy Lau. But one of the reasons was, I believe, it's not because I could do anything better than anybody else. I was just middle of the road as far as ability, but I think it's because they realized that I understood how they worked, how they choreographed, how they shot, and I was willing to just shut up and just do it, you know, and to be a team player. Jackie once said that, you know, the one thing he liked about a lot of fighters, oh, I have to win, I can't get beaten by you. And the fact that I was okay, it didn't matter. I'm the bad guy. I read the script, and the script says I get beaten up, so away we go. As long as you pay me, I'm okay with it.
Wow.
So that was my experience, doing those sorts of movies.
What an incredible experience it must have been. And I still believe. Yeah, yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I still believe to this day that the '80s Hong Kong action, there's no beating it in any near future. How do you see Hong Kong movies nowadays? I mean, how do you feel about the differences between specifically the fighting style that they've gotten to progress over time? How do you feel are the major differences in Hong Kong cinema from the '80s era or early '90s to nowadays?
The biggest difference is, well, yes, the fighting content has changed. And the reason is obvious. Sammo said to me when we were doing Twinkle Twinkle, he said, "Oh, Richard, why don't my movies work in America?" I said, "Well, Sammo, you don't kind of have a script per se. It's written as you go. The fights are very long, so in America that makes them kind of unbelievable. Even though, using the wires or using mini tramps, they had incredible athleticism. In America in those days, I tried to explain, unless the character is a superhero, as soon as you have them doing something that's kind of takes itself out of the realm of believability, American audiences tend to go, that's bullshit, you couldn't do that, as opposed to appreciating the artistry and the talent in doing that sort of a move. But one of the things that happens with movies, it's like when I started, when I look back at some of the '80s movies, it's not funny, but it's kind of like, oh wow, it's so dated. But you got to remember that's what we did then. A lot of crescent kicks and things like that. So movies went through the idea of ninja films and karate films, and then it got into Vietnam type films, like a Rambo. You got into Steven Seagal with his Aikido, and now we're into an MMA world of mixing martial arts. So pretty much with movies, you have to give an audience a type of action they can relate to. That's what they see every day. Now, MMA is UFC to me is a sport version of mixing martial arts. It's still a sport. It's not that definition of MMA, but it's still what people expect to see. And what I saw with great people like Jackie or Sammo was their evolution in understanding the appetite of an audience as you went through the years. I remember seeing a fight that Sammo did with Donnie Yen. And I forget the name of the film, but
Sapolong, I think the American title, the English title is I don't remember the English title, but it's Sapolong, I think is the name.
It may have been. It was a mixed martial arts fight, you know, where they were doing triangle chokes and everything. And I thought, it was incredible, because I always wondered what they would do incorporating grappling, which if you stayed on the ground and just grappled and people don't understand it, they go to sleep, right? But they gave such incredible energy and movement to the incorporation of the grappling with the striking. So that was a real evolution. I just recently saw a film that Sammo did, and it was under the title of Don't Dare Hurt My Daughter. Now, I don't know whether that's the name of the film. Anyway, the point being that Sammo's, he's not as old as me, but he'd been in his late 60s. And first of all, the biggest change for me is in acting, because back when I did them, if you're a bad guy, you're almost like a cartoon, you're caricature. And I often say that if I'm the bad guy and I look and I see something and I might go, they would want you to go, you know, and everything was just large, you know, and overdone. You'd see Sammo's eyes would go big and all these large expressions. Cut to a Jackie Chan in, say, The Karate Kid, or Sammo in a few of the films I've seen lately, where he's totally still. Everything's in the eyes. It's a total transformation as far as acting styles, and it's incredible. And I immediately go, oh my God, their dramatic abilities are amazing, because who's had more experience at being in films than they have, for God's sakes, right? but they allowed themselves to evolve. And also the fight scenes in this film I saw with Sammo were very much like you would see almost in the Bourne Identity. It was
Oh, okay.
very much close-quartered military style. So he and they have understood that they need to evolve from the kung fu kind of traditional drunken master style, of fighting, and get more with today, and they've managed to do that, and I think that's incredible,
I
that they're able to do that.
I totally believe that, because I think most of the Asian culture, and we can talk about culture in this sense, I believe, and especially since Hong Kong has been brought back to China in 2007, I don't remember, but I believe that the Chinese way of entertainment is a little bit because I have a lack of a better term, a little bit more childish or overexpressive in a few concerns. And I'm learning Mandarin myself nowadays. I'm learning Chinese, or trying to. And I'm in my second year. And every time in class we have this little video or this little cartoon of Chinese to learn a little bit more. And it's always like, those jokes are so overemphasized. It's such an overacting. So I believe that probably Sammo Hung had a little bit of a scar back in the day in the 90s or early 2000s with martial law, because martial law didn't really quite make it as maybe he thought he would. Not like Jackie Chan with Rush Hour when he finally stepped in the American market. So this type of urgency to always be a little bit better, always perfect in owning our skills, is something that really makes for the best in the business. Specifically,
it's why Bruno and I still say that Sammo is still the most amazing action director, because of he understands that he needs to evolve, as do a lot of them, and as did Jackie. I mean, Jackie told me at one stage, he said, I know I have to learn Western boxing and I have to change my style. I can't keep doing the same kung fu moves over and over again. I mean, they're very, very smart people, and it was just the style at that particular time, like I was, you talk about American movies. Well, people have got to realize back then that Sammo and people like Jackie, they could make a movie that would work for certain parts of Europe and Asia, and they had to make a very different movie to work in America. In fact, when, Jackie invited me to a Chinese New Year celebration when he was making the first Rush Hour. And I remember walking in, I'm paraphrasing, but they said, oh, how's it going? He said, oh, fucking American movie, never make another one. And I said, oh, why, what happened? He said, oh, you know how I like to change everything. Because they would never choreograph a master of any fight. They would make it up as they go and as they shot it. So he said on Rush Hour, he said, oh, I say, I'm going to change this, And he said, 6 people have a heart attack, director, writer, producer. Because, in America, everything had to be scripted. They had to know in advance. Everything was storyboarded, which was not that style. But Jackie also realized that in order to make a movie palatable to an American audience, he had to allow himself to be directed, and it had to be a very different experience to work. And Sammo, with what you're talking about, the series that he did in America, his biggest frustration, because I spoke to him about that too, was really about time. See, Sammo's used to controlling all the action. But when you do a series, as people may or may not know, it's such an amount of time, a short amount of time to shoot an episode, that they have a main unit and they have a second unit. Well, the second unit was always left to somebody doubling Sammo and doing all his action for him. So he wasn't involved in so much of the action, which of course, if he had been, would have been much, much more amazing. And he also wasn't allowed any input, which really upset him, because he would say to the director, oh, I would like to, help or give some input into the way certain things are shot. And they basically, and I'm paraphrasing, the American producer would be like, well, you just worry about doing the acting and everything. We'll worry about making the movie. And he was really upset because he said, again, as I have said, nobody's had more experience than him at filmmaking. And he thought, why wouldn't they allow input from me? So that was a lot of disappointment coming from him, even in that regard, that led to him not really having a great experience shooting that series.
Who came up with the catchphrase, painful? How about now?
Painful? No, I'll be okay.
No, that was Sammo. I'm not even sure how that happened. Yeah, it became one of those things that we used in a couple of movies because, you know, look, as you know, with the Hong Kong movies, most of them then were just either dubbed in Cantonese or Mandarin.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is most people never heard Jackie's voice or Sammo's voice or Yuen Bill's voice. They were always dubbed with a dubbing troupe. You know, they do all the dialogue. So when we were doing those and I had dialogue, I basically just I would just speak enough English that would be the length of whatever the Mandarin or Cantonese translation would be. And it's a good question. I'm sure it's Sammo that came up with it. Maybe it was me, but it was, you know, because a couple of times I say painful and, you know, eventually I say, how about now? And he's like, well, he's doing this. And he's basically saying, oh, I don't feel anything because my body is all numb, which was, you know, and it just became a bit of a catchy phrase. People were even going to get T-shirts made up with painful. I had a great relationship with Sam. We had a lot of fun, as Jackie and by the way, thank God, because when I worked there, if you're a local, like a Brit or something, doing a bit part in one of those movies, oh man, you were hauled over the coals. They'd be yelling, you were stupid, you had no timing, this and this and this. But Jackie, I just got on really well with Jackie. And I think one of the reasons is, again, I would shut up and just do it. And I would take all the bumps. I didn't mind the contact, you know. And I also had the timing that worked for him, which he always says was the most important thing you have to have. Far more than just fighting ability, was had the timing that suited their sort of choreography. So Jackie would take me to shopping around Hong Kong, to, you know, buying cameras and all sorts of stuff. Sam would invite me into the editing, even though it was very short because we were filming a lot of times 18 hours a day. But so a lot of his crew of stunties saw me and how much I got on with them. So I was like, I was okay. I was in the inner circle, not the outer circle. So I got treated quite well, you know, thank goodness, because it could be rough.
And people don't realize how hard it is. And you talked about doing a combination of moves for like 30 takes or something like that. So whenever people
18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
When I did the fight scene with Sammo. City Hunter,
crazy.
6.5 weeks to shoot one fight. That one fight I did was with Jackie, which was long. It's like 9 minutes of film time, but a lot of it's because you're there until they decide what the next moves are, because they'd come out and pull out a stunt mattress and they'd all lie down and figure out what the next moves are. That's the difference between American and say Hong Kong movies, was
it's not scripted.
They wouldn't lock themselves into a master, which was very freeing because they would do a little edit. They would decide which direction they wanted the fight to go, how much longer they wanted to be, as opposed to America, you do a master and then you go in and do the coverage, you know. They're both different styles, you know.
Are you nowadays only based on Melbourne, or do you still live on and off in Los Angeles as well, or California?
No, still on and off in Los Angeles. But Melbourne's home. You know, as you would know, there's nothing like home. I love being in Melbourne. I'm still teaching seminars here. I've got, you know, a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Association, and I've got maybe 10 clubs under me, and I sort of run that myself. So I love being in Melbourne. US is more of a work home for me. Especially at this stage of my life, you know, I'm just ready to spend more time back in Melbourne if that works out.
Do you and Chuck Norris still get together every once in a while?
Yeah, no, we Chuck was here not all that long ago. He came out for a Comic-Con or a Supernova, event where they come and certain artists come and sign stuff. And Judy and I were going to go to Sydney and spend a day. We ended up spending 5 days with he and Gina, his wife. And it was one of the best times because, you know, people don't realize, Chuck Chuck started my film career for me, by having me work in Octagon and Walker, Texas Ranger. It was an amazing experience. Chuck was best man at my wedding. And the reason we got Chuck as best man is in case any shit happened with any of the guests. No, just to handle it.
In case ninjas dropped by, you gotta have Chuck.
Exactly, and tried to steal a wedding cake or something.
Yeah.
Or my wife. But,
Careful.
Yeah. But Chuck was, so we've been friends forever, and I don't get to see him as much over the last matter of years because he's been living in Houston. He's got a place in Hawaii. But I got to tell you, this time in Sydney was the best. I mean, Chuck, we went out and we never stopped laughing because we started reminiscing about the old times and training his house and all the movies and things we got up to. And he said, Rich, he said, you're like my best friend, And I thought, how fantastic is that? It's not just a professional thing with us. I mean, we were legitimately really, really close friends, having trained together so long. And he's a wonderful human being. So, I feel really privileged that we still do have that friendship to this day since 1978 when he came out to Australia. That's pretty often say most marriages don't last that long, let alone friendships.
I wish I were a fly. To be there and hang out with you guys and listen to all the stories. And it's gotta be amazing.
I tell you, the one thing though, Bruno, it does make you go, when we think of how long ago, I mean, 79, are you kidding me? That's 50 years ago. And you get to the stage where like, where did that time go? How did it happen that Chuck's 80 now, 80 years of age. I'm 70. You're like, oh my God, how did that happen? Wonderful stories, but you still start to freak out a bit and go, now the years are really going through very quickly.
But legends. I mean, you guys live and walk the walk, and don't. I mean, you talk the talk, but walk the walk. I mean, talk the talk. I mean, a lot of people nowadays talk the talk, and they didn't even crawl, much less walk. But
thank you.
But I'm a firm believer that you said something that's very important, which is never to forget who gave you your first chance in terms of you going to California. Was very, very important for you, with Linda Ronstadt being the one to hire you to be her personal bodyguard, and Chuck Norris being the one to giving you that extra hand of not only working out with him at his place in Los Angeles, but also putting you in the movie business because he realized that there was something in you, there was talent. And I believe yeah.
And I just want to say to that, yes, you bring up a really important point. It's so important. So many people get to a certain level of success and do forget where they came from and who helped them along the way. I mean, it goes right back for me to Tino Soberano. I mean, he started me on my martial arts journey. He's like my dad in the martial arts, and I'll never forget that. He would, when you start martial arts, as a kid, you don't know whether your instructor's good because you don't know anything.
Yeah.
So it's only whether after you've wasted a lot of time and money, that you sort of realize they were the wrong instructor. For me, I felt blessed, and I couldn't have had a better, more passionate and more that strove to give us more excellence in the martial arts than Tino. And then you got Bob Jones, wanting me to start with him, the schools. That's what he got me into the bodyguard work, bouncing work I did, which led into meeting Chuck Norris and so on and so on. But I do want to say to people that something I realized that, you say a lot of times, yes, Chuck got me my movie career, this and this. But I would say to people that ever look back, absolutely respect and pay homage to where you came from. But I also say, do not take yourself out of the equation, meaning that, yes, you can get introduced to something like bodyguarding or movies, but I wouldn't have been a bodyguard for 20, 25 years or been in movies 40 years if I didn't also have a certain resilience and a certain drive to be the best I could be. And so I say to people, yes, pay homage to your teachers, your instructors, but just remember that you were the one that stayed on the mat, went to the academy, went to the dojo, went to acting school or anything, you're the huge part of the success that you have now. So it's a multifaceted sort of appreciation thing, you know.
And you have a great sentence, which I just came to realize myself in my life. And then I saw this interview of you saying it, and I was like, oh, he beat me to it. You said something like, I went from going for why me to why not me. And I was like, oh, I just figured that out. He figured that out like 30 years ago or 40 years ago. That is.
Yeah, well, that's great that you read that. That was Force 5. You know, that was my first lead. For those who don't know that story, you know, I worked with Chuck in Octagon and a couple of other movies, and Pat Johnson, who used to be a partner of Chuck's and another wonderful martial artist, who was actually the choreographer on The Big Brawl with Jackie Chan, who is the one that actually, he suggested to Jackie that Jackie should use me in a movie. That's another one to be thankful to is Pat. But
Johnson.
Anyway, he wanted me to audition for Force 5. Now, Force 5 was directed by Bob Klaus, who directed Enter the Dragon, and was produced by Freddie Weintraub, who produced Enter the Dragon. So you got the dragon. So I had to go and audition. Now, I'm on the mat with 100 of some of the best martial artists in America auditioning for leads. And I remember looking at all these people and I thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? I said, I've got a funny accent that people can't understand, being an Aussie accent, you know, and all of this. And anyway, I ended up auditioning and it got down to 10 people for the leads. And I realized I'm still one of these 10 people out of 100. And that was a huge change in attitude for me. I used to be very big and still am into what I call positive imagery or visualization. You know, visualizing results, in other words, creating a result and sort of becoming your own invention, I would say, you know. And I started thinking, well, if it's down to 10, I must have the physical abilities they need. What is it that's going to make them choose me? And I started to visualize just standing in a line and Bob and Fred looking and going and having energy coming off me, you know, almost like this aura. Because you hear about the X factor. I'm not saying I have it, by the way, but the X factor in certain people that work in movies, there's something about them. And I thought, I want to try and exude that. So Bob Klaus will go, I want him. There's something about him. And that's kind of what happened. So suddenly I'm one of the leads, which changed my attitude from, instead of saying, why me? I thought, why not me? I've worked just as hard as anybody else. I can do this. And that was a big turning point for me in my attitude, you know, to working in the industry.
And it's very fortunate as well that the foundation was built, because sometimes people grow too fast and they start to develop that mindset, well, why not me? And they're not ready. Sometimes speed kills. So I believe one thing that I was going to mention earlier also, because of the talent, and nobody would pick up anybody if they didn't have enough talent. I believe somebody told me this, a stunt coordinator told me that who you know sometimes or most of the time will give you your first job, but who you are will give you your second. So that's that pretty much says a lot about your road. Yeah.
Well said. That's exactly the same thing. Yes.
I would love to just finish this off, and I'm sorry I've kept you this long, but I mean I'm starstruck. So please give me a break.
Bruno. It's been fun.
I would just like to, you know, that show with the late James Lipton called The Actor Studio, where he got to.
Oh, I love that show. I watched nearly every one of those. Yes.
Yeah. Me too. He's got this questionnaire in the end with the quick questions. I would just like to answer. I would just like to ask you a couple of quick questions, just so people get to know a little bit of your tweaks or perks or whatever, everyday life stuff. So, which is your least favorite word? Whichever comes to mind.
Mediocrity.
Wow. Whoa. Okay.
I hate mediocrity. I think society is full of people that accept being mediocre. I think, especially for what we do as martial arts, we should always be striving for excellence, not just to be okay, you know. And I always say that the the attainment of excellence is impossible or unattainable, but the journey is not. So mediocrity is my least favorite word.
Excellent, excellent, excellent answer. What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, my wife yelling at me for not putting things away or being tidy enough or dribbling stuff down my shirt.
Is she listening to this? Is she over there?
No, she's asleep. She's asleep on the couch. She gets bored, mate. She doesn't want to listen to this shit all over again.
Yeah. They're like, okay, here you go again. Yeah, I know, master.
blah,
Sifu,
blah, blah,
sensei. Yeah. Let me go to bed. They get tired of us. They get so tired of us.
See, that'd be her least favorite noise is me talking.
What gives you most pleasure in everyday life? And consider little small things like, I don't know, a fresh glass of water. I don't know. Nowadays.
Nowadays, honestly, and by the way, this is not to not be aware of the hardship that so many people going out of, being out of work and all of this. But honestly, one of my biggest pleasures is when Judy and I top and tail on the couch. We'll sleep on either end of the couch, put a blanket over and have a little nap for 15 minutes in the middle of the day.
Wow.
I just love that downtime, that chance to just not have anything on the books or no agenda, where you just, I know it sounds a cliche, but you just be in the moment and you just enjoy being with somebody that's like your soulmate and just enjoying that moment. That means everything to me now.
Which other profession would you like to have tried other than all you did in your life? This is a tough one.
Oh, dear me. Yeah. I was going to say even being a director, but I did try that a little bit, so that's kind of not true that I didn't get to try that, though I would like to do it in a bigger way. What other profession would I like to try?
Is there anything, any job, any profession that you look at and like, that might be interesting, and completely opposite or nothing to do with your profession specifically? I don't know, driving cars.
Yeah, I know. No. In a weird way, being a chef.
Ooh.
There's something about being a chef when I look at the passion and what goes into to being original and coming up with your own expression of creating a dish. Because there's a lot of parallels to martial arts in that sense, that I've always said art is about individual expression. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be a clone of your teacher or whoever else. You want to be individual. I mean, that's the definition of art, is you expressing how you feel about whatever it is you've learned or your life experiences. And I feel a chef sort of gets to do that. It's a competitive field. And yeah, I think that's kind of intriguing for me.
I think I'm off to Melbourne to try some of Richard Norton's special dishes. That's a great leeway. You just fell right into my next question. You just fell. I just gave you a
toast
judo
and
throw.
Vegemite.
I'm sorry, what?
Toast and Vegemite. Toast with Vegemite on it. And like most people who are not born in Australia, you will probably cark over and die if you try Vegemite. Most people can't stand it, but we're growing up eating it, so that's what you're going to get if you come here, and I'll make you eat it.
Okay. I have no idea what it is, so okay. But I'm very picky with food. Actually, I'm very tough with food, and so you kind of fell into my next question. What's your favorite food?
Well, you mean one food type or generally? Because I'm actually on a vegan. I'm sort of a vegan person at the moment, not having it's all plant-based for me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If you have to pick, that's a hard. Probably potatoes. Strangely enough, and Judy cooks the best homemade, what we call them, French fries or chips with a little bit of sea salt on them, and a little bit of chili sauce. Oh, that's fantastic for me. And they've got to be boiling hot. That and mashed potato and pumpkin. mashing them together. So it's that's divine.
Yeah, people forget about mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes are the shit. I love that. I always love
Well,
that.
I grew up. My mum cooked the best mashed potato. I grew up as a kid all the way along. We had mashed potato, and she'd mash pumpkin, but it's got to be piping hot. It has to be incredibly hot.
Oh, okay.
So it almost burns your tongue. Oh, I love that.
Do you have any little perk or phobia that nobody else has? Is there something about you that's like, oh, that's typical Richard?
Well, no, the only ones the ones that know me, like family and everything, would know I have a bit of a phobia about spiders. In fact, I was doing a little interview with Cynthia Rothrock the other day. She happened to bring up this story when we're shooting China O'Brien and being in this cell. And she started saying, oh, and Richard started screaming, because there was this spider on the wall. I said, well, that's a lie, Cynthia. I wouldn't scream at anything. But I probably did. You know, I had this thing, 'cause in Australia we have huntsman spiders that are quite large, you know, and they used to crawl in the bedroom and over the roof and everything. And yeah, I had a bit of a phobia about spiders, so that's one thing. But that's okay. But I've made peace with them. Like I would never kill one. I will do everything in my power to cover it up and put it in something and take it outside. But it's just the idea of hairy legs sort of crawling over me is not something I relish. Thank you.
With me, I would say it's probably...
You can't armbar a spider. They got too many legs, or you can't
Yeah.
heel hook them. So.
Yeah, she will submit the hell out of you.
Yeah.
A movie that inspires you, or a movie. What's your favorite movie other than martial arts movies? So let's not get into biased territory. So, do you have any movie that you love? Movie of your life?
Oh, you know, there's a number. I just used to be such a fan of Paul Newman, you know, who's one of the older actors. I love Paul Newman. I thought he's such strength of character and everything. There's a number of movies that he did I just love. I really enjoy some of those.
Like Cool
those
Hand
old
Luke,
films.
Nobody Can Eat 50 Eggs?
Oh God, Cool Hand Luke, you know, how good is that?
That is an amazing movie.
That happens to a person and an actor of such world renown, you know, of status. He's just, one of the biggest thrills. I used to live in Malibu when I started working with Linda, and there was a little coffee shop in the Colony in Malibu, and I went in to have a coffee, and over there is Paul Newman. I nearly wet my pants because, you know, I don't get carried away with people and stardom, but some people, like seeing him was like, oh my God, that made it for me.
Wow. And music.
What
type of music do you listen to, or band, or if you don't have a band to say, what type of music do you listen to? What's your favorite type of music?
Oh no, yeah, no, I love a real variety of music, but I still very much in the 70s and everything. Like Pink Floyd is still one of my favorite all-time bands. Just some of the guitar solos and everything in some of those records, you know, Dark Side of the Moon and all those sorts of things. I'm a real fan of Pink Floyd. And even like, oh God, you know, I toured with the Rolling Stones and people like that. Of course, I was introduced to a lot of that movie of that era and that ilk, you know.
Did you get close with them, or were you just keeping your distance, or did you really get close? I know you taught karate to Mick Jagger and to Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, no, I actually got quite close to them. See, one of the things about when Bob and I worked as bodyguards is one of our things was that we virtually would almost dress and become like a member of the band. So we were, you know, it'd be like you almost become like the hairdresser on a movie set. You know, the hairdresser is the one that sort of fixes the actor up, and they get to sort of be confidants and know everything that's going on. Well, I had an adjoining room to most of the acts, wherever they were. There's Linda, James Taylor, David Bowie I was with for 8 years, and you know, you get to be very, very close, mainly because I never looked like a bodyguard, so I wasn't this big hulking presence. So I'd almost look like a member of the band, hence going at the dinner or parties or anything. It wasn't like this typical idea of a bodyguard. So I yeah, we just became really good friends. Like with Mick and all those, I got on great with them. Linda and James, of course, I worked with for 14 years. So
Wow.
we had incredibly close friendships. James Taylor was in Australia a few years back, and he's got his tour manager to find where I was in Melbourne, and flew Judy and I to Sydney. We hung out with him and his wife and kids for a few days, and
Oh,
that's heartwarming when you realize that you're not just an employee, that you really do form friendships with acts like that and people like that. ABBA, I work with ABBA, and I used to train the girls every day on the beach and the guys sometimes, and we just got to be so incredibly close, with them. Joe Cocker, I worked with him. He wanted me to go and work with him full time. So yeah, there was good relationships formed in that regard, and something I'm feel very proud of. To have that sort of relationship.
incredible, incredible. Well, I
But
think you.
and the good thing, Bruno, is it all. I know you're going to wrap this, but the journey still goes on. I just want to be a little bit of a role model. Say it ain't over till it's over. At 70, just finished working on the Suicide Squad reboot with James Gunn, which is just a fantastic experience. And before that, we did Ghost in the Shell and X-Men, Dark Phoenix, and The Last Fury Road, and we're going on to a new Mad Max movie soon. So the great thing is that it's not over yet. So you can come and see me in a couple of years, and I'll have a whole lot of new stories for you.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Well, thank you so much for this incredible time. I wanted to know, because sometimes in the news they talk about stuff like there was these incidents of the fires in Australia, but now they don't say anything. Is everything all right over there? Did it really go that overboard, or was it just a news
Oh
or
no,
media
no,
frenzy?
it was everything they said. They were the
Oh,
worst fires just ever. There was like, they reckon over 1 billion animals,
oh,
that he destroyed. In fact, some even being driven close to extreme amount of property loss of life. They were horrendous, those fires. They were as bad as were depicted. Now, yes, like anything, even like COVID-19, it will pass. The bushfires pass. There are still people, of course, that are still hurting from those, especially if they lost loved ones, lost properties, and everything else. They were very, very bad. And but there's regrowth. There's an old saying, with fires and bushfires, the Aborigines knew this before anyone, that fires are necessary. That's what brings about
yes.
regrowth.
Hmm.
And that is happening. So we get on with it, and it's unfortunate now we're dealing with this COVID-19, which is very soon after such a national tragedy as the bushfires in Australia were. But people pull together. It brings out the best in people sometimes, and it certainly did in that case. And I think it's doing the same with what we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, because they never say when it all stopped, or when everything became a little better, or when there's something a little bit
Yeah,
of a
well, it
harmonic in
wasn't the
the.
news. What happened is there was incredible heat, and then we had incredible rains. In fact, the rains almost caused as much damage as the fires did, because when you burn all the growth and everything else, and you lose stability in the soils, you get a lot of soil erosion. And the problem even with the rains, and why it causes flooding, is because of the heat and the fires. The soil is baked so hard that the water is not absorbed. The rain is not
Hmm.
absorbed into a soil, so it runs. So it becomes like an
A
avalanche of
flood.
water, and that
Yeah.
caused incredible damage as well. But they're basically, it's the rains that ended up, of course, along with the help of firefighters in Australia and from different parts of the world that came in. They, of course, were incredibly instrumental. But the rains are what ended up extinguishing most of the fires.
I'm glad everything is much better right now, and I want to thank you so much once again for taking the time to do this, sir. It's been a pleasure, and I hope I can see you
Thank you,
soon.
Bruno. Yeah,
So,
no, I've enjoyed it, and let's do it again. There's many more stories we could delve into.
thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you, Bruno. You got it,
See
my
you.
friend. You take care.
We'll
See
keep in
you.
touch.
Bye
See you
bye.
later. Thanks so much.
Bye.